Part 1. The Desperate Plea. The conference room on HFY was filled with panic. 17 different alien species sat around the massive circular table, and every single one of them looked terrified. Hyunwoo stood near the back wall watching the chaos unfold. He was the human ambassador, but right now nobody was paying attention to him. That was fine. Humans were used to being ignored by the Galactic Union. The holographic display in the center of the room showed another planet dying. Red markers indicated where the Vren collective had landed. Within hours, those red markers had spread across entire continents. The planet's population of 4 billion was being consumed, absorbed into the hive mind that was sweeping across the galaxy like a plague. 3 worlds in 2 months, Council Chairman Veloth said, his voice shaking. The tall, blue-skinned Thelaran looked like he had not slept in days. Our fleets cannot stop them. Every time we engage, they adapt. They learn. They consume our ships and use our own technology against us. We need to evacuate the border worlds, someone suggested, a small, insect-like delegate from the heron species. Pull back our defenses and create a stronger defensive line. And abandon billions of citizens? Another delegate shouted. That is not acceptable. The argument exploded across the chamber. Voices overlapped in a dozen different languages. Hyunwoo watched the translation device on his wrist work overtime to keep up. He had been with the Union for 3 years now, ever since humanity joined as the 18th member species. In all that time, he had never seen them like this. The Galactic Union prided itself on being civilized. They had rules for everything. Rules for war, rules for trade, rules for how to treat prisoners. They fought their conflicts with precision weapons and careful strategies designed to minimize casualties. They had not fought a real war in over 300 years. Now something had come that did not care about their rules. Perhaps, a cold voice cut through the noise, we should consider unconventional options. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Counselor Brath, a reptilian creature from the military caste of the Drexian species. He was one of the few military officers on the council, and he looked directly at Hyunwoo as he spoke. The humans have experience with this kind of warfare, Brath continued. Their history is full of what they call total war. Perhaps they could offer insight. The silence that followed was heavy with discomfort. Hyunwoo could feel every eye in the room turn toward him. He knew what they were thinking. Humanity's history was public record in the Union database. Thousands of years of warfare, millions dead in conflicts that spanned entire continents, nuclear weapons used against their own species. The Union had studied human history with a mixture of horror and fascination. Veloth looked at Hyunwoo with an expression that might have been desperation. Ambassador, does Earth have any recommendations? Hyunwoo stepped forward slowly. He had been waiting for this moment, though he had hoped it would not come. I would need to consult with our military command. But I should warn you, Chairman. Human methods of warfare are very different from yours. Different how? Veloth asked. You fight wars to win territory or resources. You have rules about collateral damage and civilian casualties. You try to minimize suffering. Hyunwoo paused, choosing his words carefully. Humans fight wars to survive. When our existence is threatened, we do not have rules. We do whatever is necessary. The chamber erupted again, but this time with outrage instead of panic. Several delegates stood, shouting that humanity's barbaric methods had no place in civilized space. Others argued that desperate times required desperate measures. Veloth had to call for order 3 times before the room quieted down. We are facing extinction, Veloth said quietly. Every military strategist we have consulted says the same thing. With our current methods, we cannot stop the Vren. They will consume world after world until there is nothing left. He looked around the chamber. I do not like this any more than you do, but we are out of options. The vote took an hour. In the end, 12 species voted to request human military assistance. 4 voted against. 1 abstained. It was enough. Hyunwoo sent the message that night from his quarters. The quantum communicator linked directly to Earth, to the United Earth Defense Force headquarters in Geneva. He typed out the situation report and the Council's request, then added his own assessment at the end. They are asking us to save them, but they do not understand what that means. They think we will fight like them, just more effectively. They do not realize that if we commit to this, we will fight to destroy the enemy completely. Recommend we make this clear before accepting. The response came back 6 hours later. Admiral Jiwan herself had signed it. Tell the council we will help them. But they need to understand our terms. If we fight to win. That means total warfare. No limits, no rules except victory. If they cannot accept this, we will not waste our soldiers' lives trying to fight with one hand tied behind our backs. Hyunwoo read the message 3 times. Then he scheduled an emergency council session for the next morning. When he delivered Earth's response, the chamber fell completely silent. Veloth looked like he wanted to refuse, to say that there had to be another way. But the holographic display was still showing planets dying, red markers spreading like cancer across world after world. How long would it take for your forces to arrive? Veloth asked finally. The first expeditionary fleet can be here in 3 weeks, Hyunwoo replied. Admiral Jiwon requests full intelligence on Vren capabilities, biology, and territorial holdings. Our military command will develop a strategy based on that information. And if we accept your help, we accept your methods, Brath said. It was not a question. Yes, Hyunwoo said simply. There is no middle ground. You are asking humanity to fight a war of extinction. We know how to do that. But you will not like how we do it. Veloth looked at the display again. Another world had just fallen. 5 billion lives consumed in a matter of days. He closed his eyes and made the decision that would change everything. We accept your terms. May the gods forgive us, Hyunwoo nodded. He sent the confirmation to Earth immediately. As he walked back to his quarters that night, he thought about what was coming. The Union had no idea what they had just unleashed. They thought humans would be like them, just better at violence. They would learn soon enough. Humanity did not just fight wars. When their survival was at stake, when extinction looked them in the face, humans became something else entirely. Something that did not stop, did not hesitate, did not show mercy. The Vren had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened a species that had clawed its way up from the bottom of the food chain through sheer stubbornness and violence, a species that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed them. Now the Galactic Union would see what happened when you asked humanity for help. They would see what humanity delivered. Part 2. The Human Way Captain. Sung-ho stood on the bridge of the battleship Incheon, watching the alien station grow larger on the view screen. Kelvor Station was massive, a spinning wheel of metal and crystal that housed 30,000 military personnel from 6 different species. It looked elegant, almost artistic, like someone had designed it to be beautiful rather than functional. His own ship looked nothing like that. The Incheon was all angles and armor plating, covered in weapons batteries and reinforced hull sections. It was ugly and brutal and designed for one purpose only. Behind him, 11 more human warships followed in formation. The Galactic Union escort vessels kept their distance, like they were afraid to get too close. Sir, we are receiving a docking vector from the station, Lieutenant Jamin reported from the communications console. Acknowledge and proceed, Sung-ho replied, and send a message to all ships. Shore leave is denied. I want everyone ready to deploy at a moment's notice. The docking procedure took 2 hours. By the time Sung-ho made it to the station's command center, he was already tired of the stairs. Every alien they passed in the corridors stopped to watch the humans go by. Some looked curious. Most looked nervous. Commander Ilrin was waiting in the briefing room. She was tall and thin, with silver skin and 3 fingers on each hand. Her species, the Kelvorians, were known for their tactical precision. She had fought in 4 border conflicts and never lost a battle. She looked at Sung-ho like he was something dangerous that had crawled out of the dark. Captain, she said, her voice polite but cold. Welcome to Kelvor Station. I have prepared a full briefing on our defensive strategy for Parthenos. The holographic display lit up, showing the planet below and the surrounding space. Ilrin began explaining the Union's plan. Defensive positions, evacuation routes, rules of engagement. Everything was carefully calculated to minimize casualties on both sides. Even though the Vren were trying to exterminate them, the Union was still trying to fight cleanly. Sung-ho listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned forward and studied the display. Do you have intelligence on Vren fleet composition? He asked. Yes, we have identified 3 main vessel types. Ilrin pulled up images of the Vren bioships. They looked like massive organisms grown rather than built, pulsing with stolen life. The assault ships, the support vessels, and the resource processors. Resource processors, Sung-ho repeated. Those are the ships that carry assimilated biomass? Yes, they contain the remains of conquered populations. billions of consciousness fragments still connected to the hive mind. We have attempted to develop rescue protocols, but where are these resource ships typically positioned during battle? Ilrin looked confused by the question. Behind the main battle line. They are not combat vessels. Why? Because that is what we are going to destroy first, Sung-Ho said calmly. The room went silent. Ilrin stared at him like he had just suggested something obscene. Those ships contain victims, she said slowly. Sentient beings who were forcibly assimilated. We cannot simply destroy them. They are already dead, Sung-Ho replied. His voice was not cruel, just matter of fact. The beings they were are gone. What remains is fuel for the Vren war machine. If we destroy those ships, we cripple their resource supply. That would be genocide, one of Ilrin's officers said, his voice shaking. Mass murder of prisoners. Sung-Ho turned to look at the officer. He was young, probably had never seen real combat. You think the Vren will let them go if you win? You think there is a way to rescue them? He shook his head. There is not. The only mercy we can give them is to make sure the Vren cannot use them anymore. The Vren fleet arrived 2 days later, 73 ships moving in perfect coordination like a single organism. The Union fleet moved to intercept, and Sung-Ho watched from the Inchan's bridge as they engaged according to their tactical doctrine. Precision strikes. Minimal waste. Everything by the book. The Vren adapted within an hour. They learned the Union's patterns and started exploiting them. 3 Union ships were boarded and consumed before they could retreat. Sir Admiral Jiwan is on the command channel, Jaemin reported. Sung-Ho accepted the connection. The Admiral's face appeared on the screen, her expression hard and focused. Captain, you are authorized to engage. Show them what we do. Yes, ma'am. Sung-Ho switched to the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is the Inchan. Execute attack pattern Delta. Primary targets are the resource vessels in the enemy rear formation. Nuclear weapons free, no survivors. The human fleet broke formation and accelerated past the confused Union ships. They ignored the Vren battle line completely, burning hard toward the massive resource processors at the back of the enemy fleet. The Vren tried to redirect their forces, but they were too slow. Jaemin's strike group reached the first resource ship and launched a full nuclear salvo. The warheads impacted one after another, tearing through the biological hull. The ship died in a flash of light and radiation, taking billions of assimilated fragments with it. Target destroyed, Jaemin reported. His voice was steady, professional. Moving to the next one. On the Union command channel, Sung-Ho could hear the chaos. Ilrin was shouting about war crimes and violations of engagement protocols. Other voices were arguing, demanding the humans stand down. Sung-Ho ignored them all. Continue the attack. Target all resource vessels. I want them wiped out completely. The battle lasted 6 hours. The human fleet systematically destroyed every single resource ship in the Vren fleet, then turned their attention to the assault vessels. Dr. Unji had spent 3 weeks developing a weapon specifically for this moment. Viral warheads designed to target Vren biology, causing their tissue to break down at the cellular level. The missiles streaked through space and detonated inside the Vren ships. The effect was immediate and horrific. The bioships began to dissolve, their hulls breaking apart as the virus spread through their systems. The Vren hive mind screamed, a psychic wail that even humans could feel as pressure behind their eyes. Sir, the Vren fleet is breaking formation, Jaemin reported. They are attempting to retreat. Do not let them, Sung-Ho ordered. Hunt them down. Kill every single one. It took another 3 hours to finish the job. By the end, the space around Parthenos was filled with frozen debris that had once been living ships. Not a single Vren vessel escaped. Parthenos was saved. 4 billion people would live because of what the human fleet had done. But when Sung-Ho docked at Kelvor Station, Commander Ilrin refused to speak to him. She just stared at him with an expression of pure horror. That night, Sung-Ho sat in his quarters and wrote his report for Admiral Jiwan. His hands were steady as he typed. He felt nothing except a quiet satisfaction that the mission had been successful. He ended the report with a simple statement. The Union now understands what they have asked for. I do not believe they are grateful, but they are alive. That is what matters. He sent the report and poured himself a drink. Outside his window, the debris field sparkled in the light of the local star. Billions of dead destroyed because it was necessary, because survival required hard choices. Sung-Ho raised his glass to the window and drank alone in the dark. Part 3. Escalation. The council chamber on Thalora Prime looked different than it had a month ago. Half the delegates who had voted to request human assistance were no longer attending sessions. They had been replaced by representatives who viewed humanity with open fear. The holographic displays showed battle reports, but now they showed human victories instead of Union defeats. Admiral Jiwan stood at the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back. She looked calm and professional in her dark blue uniform. Around her, the alien delegates whispered to each other in a dozen different languages. Ambassador Hyunwoo stood beside her, ready to translate if needed. "You have seen our preliminary results," Jiwan said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. 3 major engagements. 3 victories. The Vren advance has been stopped at 4 different border worlds. Our casualties have been minimal. Your methods have been excessive, Counselor Brath said coldly. The reptilian officer had supported human involvement, but even he looked uncomfortable now. The Battle of Parthenos resulted in complete annihilation of enemy forces. No prisoners, no attempt at communication. The Vren do not take prisoners, G1 replied. They consume. There is nothing to communicate with. The hive mind only understands one language: survival. We are teaching them that attacking Union space means death. You destroyed ships full of assimilated victims, another delegate said, her voice shaking. Billions of consciousness fragments that might have been saved. G1 turned to face the delegate directly. Saved how? Your own scientists confirmed that assimilation is irreversible. Those fragments are trapped in eternal suffering, used as biological computing power for the Vren hive mind. We ended their pain. That is the closest thing to mercy they will ever receive. Chairman Veloth raised one long-fingered hand for silence. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the past month. Admiral, we are grateful for your assistance, but the Council is concerned about the trajectory of this war. Your victories have been decisive, but brutal. We fear what will happen if humanity continues to escalate. Then you do not understand the situation, Jiwan said flatly. The Vren are not raiders. They are not an army seeking territory. They are a force of nature consuming everything in their path. You cannot negotiate with them. You cannot contain them. The only way to stop them is to destroy them completely. She pulled up a holographic display of Vren-controlled space. We have identified 17 breeding worlds where the Vren produce new organisms, 6 resource processing centers, multiple fleet staging areas. I am proposing a full counteroffensive. We take the war to their territory. We destroy their ability to wage war. We eliminate them as a threat. The chamber exploded with noise. Delegates shouted over each other, some in support, most in horror. Veloth had to activate the chamber's suppression field to restore order. What you are describing is genocide, Veloth said quietly. Yes, Jiwan agreed. It is them or you. Choose. The silence that followed was suffocating. Hyunwoo watched the delegates struggle with the choice in front of them. They were a civilization that had grown comfortable with peace. Violence was something they studied in history texts, not something they practiced. The idea of deliberately destroying an entire species went against every principle they claimed to value. But they were also facing extinction. And humanity was offering them survival at a terrible price. Hyunwoo stepped forward. Council members, I understand your hesitation. Humanity's history is full of terrible choices made in the name of survival. We have committed atrocities. We have killed our own people by the millions. We are not proud of this. He paused, making sure every delegate was listening. But we are also still here. We survived ice ages that should have killed us. Plagues that reduced our population by half. Wars that turned our cities into glass. We survived because when extinction faced us, we did what was necessary, not what was comfortable. He gestured to the holographic display showing Vren territory. The Vren will not stop. They will not negotiate. They will consume every world in this galaxy if given the chance. Admiral Jiwan is offering you a path to survival. It is not a clean path. It is not a moral path by your standards, but it is the only path that ends with your species still existing. And if we refuse? Brath asked. Jiwan shrugged. Then we pull our forces back to human space and fortify our borders. We will survive. You will not. The vote took 3 hours and required multiple recesses. In the end, the Council granted humanity full operational authority over the counteroffensive. The vote was 9-8. Several delegates resigned immediately after casting their votes. Operation Scorched Garden began 2 weeks later. Colonel Dae-hyun led the assault on the first Vren feeding world. designated Target Gamma. His transport ship descended through an atmosphere that smelled like rotting meat. The planet had been a Union colony 3 months ago, home to 2 billion people. Now it was a processing facility. Sergeant Bora was in the first drop pod to hit the ground. She and her squad emerged into a nightmare landscape. The cities were gone, replaced by massive organic towers that pulsed with sickly light. The ground itself seemed alive, covered in a biological mat that fed nutrients to the Vren structures. Flamethrower teams forward, Bora ordered, her voice steady despite the horror around her. Burn everything. Leave nothing functional. Her squad moved through the organic structures systematically. They used flamethrowers to incinerate the processing towers, chemical weapons to poison the biological mat, and orbital bombardment to destroy anything too large to handle on foot. The Vren sent waves of drones and partially assimilated defenders, bodies still screaming in voices that might have been human once. Bora's squad did not hesitate. She had been briefed on what to expect. She knew that the screaming things attacking them were already dead, just meat puppets controlled by the hive mind, but knowing did not make it easier. Contact Northeast Corridor, one of her soldiers reported. Multiple hostiles, some still partially intact. Bora moved to that position and saw them. 3 humanoid figures, their bodies half converted into Vren tissue, moving with jerky coordination. One of them reached toward her squad, and she could see human eyes in what remained of its face filled with agony and pleading. She raised her weapon and fired. The 3 figures fell, burning from the chemical rounds. She kept firing until they stopped moving, until there was nothing left but ash. "Keep moving," she said. "Nothing we can do for them now." The operation took 8 days. 3 Vren feeding worlds burned. Orbital strikes destroyed the breeding facilities. Chemical weapons poisoned the resource centers. Human forces were ruthless and efficient, destroying everything the Vren had built. Back on the troop transport, Bora sat in her bunk and stared at her hands. They were shaking. She could not stop seeing those human eyes pleading for help she could not give. She knew what they had done was necessary. The Vren would have used those resources to attack more worlds, consume more people. But necessary and right were not the same thing. Medic Haywan found her there an hour later. The medical officer had been treating injured soldiers all week, but she still made time to check on those who were not physically wounded. "You should eat something," Haywan said gently, sitting down beside her. "I killed them," Bora said quietly. "I looked into human eyes and burned them alive." "They were already dead," Haywan replied. "You know that. Knowing does not make it easier." Haywan had no response to that. She just sat with Bora in silence because sometimes that was all she could offer. Around them, the ship hummed with activity as it prepared for the next operation. The war was not over. It had barely begun. Part 4. The Vren Corps intelligence officer Yoon Seo had not slept in 42 hours. She sat in the analysis center aboard the command station, surrounded by holographic displays showing data streams from 100 different sources. Her team had been searching for 3 months, following every lead, analyzing every scrap of information about the Vren Collective, and finally they had found it. "Admiral, I need you to see this," she said into her communicator. Admiral Ji-Wan arrived 10 minutes later, followed by General Tae-Yang and Ambassador Hyun-Woo. They gathered around Yoon Seo's main display as she pulled up the data. "We found the primary nexus," Yoon Seo said, highlighting a region deep in Vren territory. "It is hidden inside the Kral Nebula, protected by gravitational anomalies and at least 3 layers of defensive fleets. This is the central consciousness of the entire collective. Every Vren organism is connected to it. If we destroy this, we destroy all of them." Ji-Wan studied the display carefully. "What kind of defenses are we looking at?" "Extensive. We estimate at least 200 bioships in the immediate area, plus automated defense systems and gravitational weapons. The nebula itself makes navigation difficult. We would be flying blind for most of the approach." "Casualties?" General Tae-Yang asked. Yoon Seo did not look away from the display. "High. We would need to commit most of our available forces. Best estimates suggest 30 to 40% losses just reaching the nexus." "And if we succeed?" Hyun-Woo asked quietly. "The war ends. Every Vren organism in the galaxy dies instantly when the nexus is destroyed. No more invasions. No more feeding worlds. Complete extinction." The room was silent for a long moment. Ji-Wan looked at the tactical data, running scenarios in her head. This was what every human military commander was trained for, the moment when you had to decide if victory was worth the price. "How many ships do we need?" she asked finally. 48 warships minimum, 200 support vessels, 30,000 Marines for the ground assault. "Then that is what we will use." Ji-won turned to General Taiyang. "Start preparations. I want the fleet ready to move in 2 weeks. The Union Council protested, of course. When Ji-won presented the plan, half the delegates argued that the casualties were unacceptable. But the other half looked at the reports from the border worlds that had been saved, the millions of lives preserved by human intervention, and voted to approve the operation. The massive human fleet assembled at Staging Point Delta 7. Vice Admiral Kyung-soo commanded the naval forces, while Marine Commander Hyun-soo led the ground assault teams. They spent a week running simulations and drills, preparing for the most dangerous mission humanity had attempted since joining the Galactic Union. Captain Sung-ho stood on the bridge of the Incheon, watching the other ships gather. He recognized many of them now. Ships that had fought beside him at Parthenos and a dozen other battles. Good crews, experienced in the brutal reality of this war. "All ships report ready, sir," Lieutenant Jamin said. Sung-ho nodded. "Signal the fleet. We move in 5 minutes." The journey to the Krell Nebula took 3 days at maximum speed. They entered the outer edges and immediately encountered resistance. Vren patrol ships tried to intercept them, but the human fleet pushed through, destroying everything in their path. The nebula itself was like flying through thick fog. Sensors were unreliable, navigation was difficult, and the gravitational anomalies pulled at the ships constantly. And through it all, the Vren kept attacking. Fighter pilot So Young led her squadron through the chaos, dodging debris and enemy fire. Her wing had started with 20 fighters. Now she had 6. Her co-pilot Jun-ho was injured, his leg crushed when something had punched through their hull. She had sealed his compartment and kept flying. "Gold Leader, this is command. We need a bomber escort for the next attack run." "Understood," So Young replied. Her voice was steady even though her hands were shaking. "Gold Squadron, form up on me." They flew through hell. Vren interceptor organisms swarmed around them like insects. Her squadron took them down one by one, protecting the bombers as they made their attack runs. 2 more of her fighters went down, then another. By the time they completed the mission, So Young was the only one left. The fleet pushed deeper into the nebula. Ships took damage from gravitational weapons, from Vren boarding parties, from collisions with debris they could not see in time. The Incheon was boarded 3 times. Each time, Captain Sung-ho ordered the affected section sealed and vented into space, killing the invaders along with dozens of his crew. "Sir, we cannot keep taking these losses," his executive officer said after the 3rd boarding. "We can and we will," Sung-ho replied. "We do not stop. We do not turn back. We keep moving forward until the mission is complete or we are all dead." After 6 days of fighting, the fleet reached the Nexus. It was massive, a structure the size of a small moon. It pulsed with bioluminescence, and every human who looked at it felt a pressure in their mind, like something vast and alien was watching them. "All ships, this is Admiral Ji-won. This is what we came for. All batteries open fire. Marines begin boarding procedures." The fleet opened up with everything they had: nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment, viral missiles. The Nexus shuddered under the assault but held together. Its defenses were formidable, and it fought back with weapons the humans had never seen before. Marine Commander Hyun-soo led his teams in the boarding pods. They punched through the Nexus's outer hull and found themselves in corridors made of living tissue. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat. Neural pathways the size of hallways carried electrical impulses that looked like lightning. And everywhere, defense organisms. Things that might have been Vren once or might have been taken from conquered species. They fought with claws and acid in pure desperation. Hyun-soo's teams pushed forward, planting fusion charges at critical neural clusters. The plan was simple. Destroy enough of the Nexus's brain and the whole thing would collapse. But simple did not mean easy. Corporal Myung-hee held a choke point alone when her squad needed to advance. She took down 17 organisms before they overwhelmed her position. Her last transmission was simple: "Go, finish the mission." Lieutenant Sang-woo's team got surrounded in a neural chamber. He triggered his charges early, collapsing the chamber and buying time for other teams to advance. 6 Marines died with him. Hyun-soo reached the central chamber after 12 hours of continuous fighting. Half his Marines were dead. The survivors were exhausted, injured, running on nothing but determination and chemical stimulants. The overmind was waiting there. It was hard to describe. A mass of tissue and neural pathways that pulsed with consciousness. When Hyunsu entered the chamber, it spoke directly into his mind. We only seek to survive, as you do. We can coexist. We can adapt. Hyunsu placed the final charges around the chamber. His hands were steady. You destroy us. You prove you are no different. You are the same as we are. Consuming to survive, maybe? Hyunsu said out loud. But we are still here. And you will not be. He activated the charges and ran. The explosion tore through the nexus from the inside. Hyunsu barely made it back to the evacuation pod. As his pod launched, he watched through the viewport as the massive structure began to collapse. Secondary explosions rippled across its surface. The bioluminescence flickered and died. Across the galaxy, in dozens of star systems, Vren organisms simply stopped. Ships went dark and drifted. Drones fell where they stood. Feeding worlds went silent. The hive mind that had connected them all was gone. And without it, the individual organisms were nothing. The war was over. Human casualties for the operation, 12,000 dead. 21,000 wounded. 15 ships lost. But Admiral Ji-won stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the Nexus die, and she knew it had been worth it. The Vren were extinct. The galaxy was safe and humanity had paid the price in blood. Part 5, The Aftermath. The ceremony on HFY was meant to be a celebration. The Great Hall was decorated with the banners of all 17 Galactic Union species. Thousands of delegates and civilians filled the chamber to honor the victorious human military forces. But the atmosphere felt wrong, like everyone was attending a funeral instead of a victory party. Admiral Ji-won stood at the center of the hall, flanked by General Tae-yang and Marine Commander Hyun-soo. Around them stood other officers and soldiers who had fought in the war. Captain Sung-ho was there, his uniform crisp despite the scars he carried. Sergeant Bora stood at attention, her eyes fixed on the middle distance. Intelligence Officer Yoon Seo looked exhausted but composed. Chairman Veloth approached with the Star of Unity, the highest military honor the Galactic Union could bestow. His hand shook slightly as he placed the medal around Ji-won's neck. On behalf of the Galactic Union, we thank you, Veloth said. His voice was formal but cold. Your sacrifice has saved billions of lives. We honor your courage and your service. Ji-won accepted the medal without smiling. She knew what this ceremony really was. The Union was thanking them while simultaneously trying to distance themselves from what humanity had done, gratitude mixed with horror. Relief mixed with fear. Ambassador Hyunwoo watched from the side of the hall. He could see it in every alien face. They looked at the human soldiers the way people looked at dangerous animals. Useful when you needed them, terrifying when you really thought about what they could do. After the ceremony, the council convened for a closed session. Hyunwoo was invited, though he suspected it was more of a summons. He sat in his usual position, while the delegates argued among themselves. We must implement controls, Councillor Brath said, his voice hard. Humanity has proven their effectiveness, but also their danger. We cannot allow unrestricted human military presence in Union space. They saved us, another delegate protested weakly. They committed genocide, Brath countered. Complete extinction of an entire species. Yes, the Vren were a threat, but the precedent this sets is terrifying. What happens the next time humanity decides something is a threat? Veloth called for order. Ambassador Hyunwoo, does your government understand the Council's concerns? Hyunwoo stood slowly. He had been preparing for this conversation since the war ended. Chairman, my government understands perfectly. You called us when you needed someone to do terrible things. We did those things. We do not apologize for our methods because they worked. The Vren are extinct. Your people are alive. That was the mission. And now? Veloth asked. Now you are afraid of us. That is reasonable. Humans are good at violence, very good. We have spent thousands of years perfecting it, but we are also very good at controlling ourselves. Earth has been at peace for over a century. We know the difference between war and peace, between necessary force and cruelty for its own sake. The Council is considering restrictions on human military deployment, Brath said bluntly. Limited presence in Union space. Monitoring protocols, safeguards. Hyunwoo nodded slowly. We expected that. My government will not object to reasonable security measures. But understand this. When the next threat comes, and there will always be a next threat, you will call us again. Because we are the ones willing to do what is necessary. The Council passed the Terra Protocols 3 weeks later. Human military forces were restricted in most Union space. Economic partnerships continued, but several species refused human visitation rights. The Union wanted humanity's protection, but only at arm's length. On Earth, memorials were held for the dead. General Tae Yang stood before millions at the main ceremony in Seoul, reading names from a list that seemed endless. 38,000 dead, 67,000 wounded, thousands more suffering from psychological trauma. Dr. Yoonji, the xenobiologist who had created the viral weapons, stood alone in her laboratory. She had been given commendations and awards for her work. Her weapons had been decisive in multiple battles. But she could not sleep anymore. When she closed her eyes, she saw Vren organisms dying in agony from the pathogens she had designed. She knew it had been necessary. The Vren would have killed billions if left unchecked. But necessity did not erase responsibility. She had created weapons of mass destruction and used them to extinct an entire species. That knowledge would stay with her forever. Medic Hae-won worked 18-hour days in the military hospital, treating veterans who had come home broken. Some had physical injuries. Many more had wounds that could not be seen. She listened to them talk about the things they had done, the things they had seen. She offered what comfort she could, but some wounds never healed completely. Sergeant Bo-ra left the military 6 months after the war ended. She took a job as a teacher in a small city, working with children. She never told her students about her service. She wanted to build things instead of destroying them, to help things grow instead of burning them away. But sometimes at night she still saw those human eyes in the half-converted Vren organisms, still heard the screaming, still felt the weight of her weapon in her hands. Those memories never left. Admiral Ji-won retired quietly. She gave a final speech to the new class of officers at the Defense Academy, and then she disappeared from public life. She bought a small house in the mountains and spent her days in silence. But she kept her uniform in the closet, clean and pressed, ready if it was ever needed again. Ambassador Hyun-woo remained at his post on Thalora Prime. He watched the Union slowly return to normal. Trade resumed. Border disputes flared up again. The galaxy went back to its usual concerns, and the memory of the Vren War faded into history. But sometimes he saw the way aliens looked at human visitors. The fear in their eyes, the nervous distance they kept. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but the galaxy would never forget what humanity was capable of. 5 years after the war ended, a new class of Defense Force cadets gathered at the academy. They were young and eager, full of idealism about serving their species and protecting Earth. Admiral Ji-won came out of retirement just once to give them a speech. She stood at the podium, looking older now, her hair gray and her face lined with wrinkles, but her eyes were still sharp, still carrying the weight of what she had done. "You will hear many stories about the Vren War," she began. "Some will call us heroes. Some will call us monsters. Both are true. We did terrible things. We killed billions. We extincted an entire species. We fought without mercy or hesitation. The cadets listened in absolute silence, but we also saved the galaxy. Trillions of lives exist because we were willing to do what others could not. We fought a war of extinction and we won. That is not something to celebrate. It is something to understand." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "War is not glorious. Victory is not clean. The methods we use should never become easy. If the day comes when you can destroy an entire species without hesitation, without remorse, without understanding the weight of that action, then you will have become the monsters we fought against. The galaxy fears us now. That fear may prevent future wars, but we must also fear ourselves. Because the greatest danger to humanity has always been humanity itself. We have the capacity for incredible compassion and terrible violence. We must never forget that both exist inside us." She looked at each cadet, making sure they understood. "So train hard, fight smart, protect the innocent. But pray that you never have to do what we did. Pray that the galaxy never needs humanity's particular skills again. But if that day comes, if extinction stares you in the face, then do what humans have always done. Survive, no matter what." The cadets stood in silence long after she left the stage. They had come hoping to hear stories of glory and honor. Instead, they had learned the truth. that sometimes survival required terrible choices, that victory could taste like ashes, that being a hero and being a monster were not always different things. Ambassador Hyunwoo heard about the speech from the news reports. He sat in his quarters on HFY and smiled sadly. Ji-won had said what needed to be said. The galaxy had asked for help, and humanity had delivered something far worse than they expected. But the galaxy had survived, and humanity had shown that when push came to shove, when extinction was on the line, they would do whatever it took. That knowledge changed everything. The Union would never look at humanity the same way again. But they also knew who to call when the darkness came knocking, and the darkness always came eventually. Outside his window, the lights of HFY sparkled like stars. The galaxy was at peace, but Hyunwoo knew it would not last forever. Peace never did. When the next crisis came, when the next existential threat emerged from the dark between stars, the call would go out again, and humanity would answer, because that was what humans did. They survived, no matter the cost. No matter what they had to become, they survived.